We'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which this podcast was produced, the Gadigal People of the Eora Nation. We pay our respects to elders past and present. This episode contains discussion of suicide. If this raises any issues for you, support is available through the links and phone numbers in the show notes.
It's September 11th, 2001, and Yvonne Kennedy is on board American Airlines Flight 77 on her way back home after the trip of a lifetime. Her son, Simon, is at home in Australia. He's just gone to bed, but as he's about to fall asleep, he gets a phone call from his brother Lee. Lee tells him some planes have hit buildings in America. He asks them to check their mum's itinerary. Simon and Lee make the horrifying discovery that their mum is on the plane that has crashed into the Pentagon.
Now to some breaking news just through, and CNN is reporting tonight that a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center.
We believe that a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center in New York.
The unthinkable happened today. The World Trade Center, both towers, gone.
She is one of the 2,977 people who tragically lost their lives that day. They're both numb, watching on alongside the rest of the world in complete horror. I'm Matt Middleton, and this is Headgame. Today, Simon Kennedy on finding and creating happiness after unimaginable trauma. Simon Kennedy, thank you ever so much for joining me on my podcast, Headgame. How are you, mate?
I'm pretty good. Yeah, I'm good. I'm busier than I've ever been in my life, but I'm good.
Really, really excited, mate, to have you on and to really dig deep into that mindset of yours. Just talk me through your childhood.
Yeah, look, started out pretty normally. You know, I was born in the western suburbs of Sydney. It was really wonderful. It was me, an older brother who's about a year older than me, and growing up out in a very safe suburban life with a lot of love around us. And it was great. A dog, a cat, the sun was shining. Growing up, born in 1974, so you know the world was my oyster until I was about 10 years old, and when my dad died very suddenly of a heart attack, and then everything changed.
Wow, my father suddenly passed of a heart attack when I was 5, so we've got a lot more in common than I thought we ever had.
Yeah.
Take me back to that moment.
Yeah. Because my memories of my dad these days are quite impressionistic, and they're probably affected by what I like to believe as well. But he was a very, very loving dad, and I remember he came home from work one day and. He was a big fella. Like when he was young, he was like a whippet. But then as he got older and he was enjoying a 1980s diet of fried food, he got a big boy. He became a big fella. I always think he looked like the dad from the Wonder Years. It was sort of that kind of big Fred Flintstone looking bloke.
Good image.
Yeah, and he was he came home one day and he had a minor heart attack once before, which I hadn't remembered. But he came home with a bit of angina pain, and Mum said, "Yeah, look, get up to the local doctor, our local guy." And she went to the GP. He went to the GP, and dropped dead in his offices in front of the doctor. And we got a call that he was on his way to hospital. Well, that was what I was told, and I don't know if Mum knew before we got there or not. But we got to the hospital, and I remember being a little fella with my brother, and a doctor coming out and saying, "I'm sorry," I sort of had a really bad vibe on hospitals for quite some time after that. I was like,
imagine.
It's like I didn't want to go back because that's where bad news is delivered, right? It changed everything from there. It was an absolute shock. It was a heartbreak, and my mum loved him very, very much. She never remarried, never met anyone again. And it was tough because we were both 10, my brother's 11. We started to go into the teen years whilst we were handling the grief. So my poor mum was single, widow with 2 boys, becoming teenagers. No job to speak of because she worked for my father. He was the insurance broker and she was his bookkeeper. So So the family business went up in smoke when he went, and so it was a big struggle, massive struggle financially, the stress, the heartbreak, and we started acting out like young boys do in different ways.
And how did that change your relationship with your brother Lee and also with your mum? Did it fortify it, or was there a lot of confusion, a lot of anger? How did that work? Moving on from your father's passing.
Yeah. Look, I mean, it was my brother. To start with that, my brother and I, we were like typical sort of 9 and 11-year-old brothers. We used to fight a lot and wrestle, tease each other, that sort of thing. As we got bigger, especially like the anguish, the anxiety of it all, the heartbreak, all that stuff kind of made us clash more. And I think it made us compete for my mother's attention, perhaps. And I would use words. I've always used words, and I would use them. I could use them to make people laugh. I can use them to cause someone pain, and I would do that to my brother. I would say things. He was a redhead, so that was a target. In Australia,
you were a wordsmith, were you?
Well, I'm not sure if it was Shakespeare I was delivering, but it was certainly. It got a reaction, and he wasn't using words. He would just come at me big time, fists flying. So and I didn't want to fight back physically. I didn't actually want to punch my brother in the face. There was something that made me not want to do it, and so I would start him off. I would set him off, and then I'd be dealing with the arms flying at me. And I'm like, well, and for years, I reckon it was about 10 years ago when I realised my brother wasn't a violent psychotic. I was just constantly goading him and causing him to react. And I'm like, I just should have not done that. It would have been a lot easier.
And did that happen with your mum? Were you arguing with your mum, or was it more just... it just fortified you?
Well, with Mum, it was tough. It was really tough because she was. Can imagine. She was so heartbroken, and I remember being 10 or 11, probably about 11 at the time, and it took her, I think, a year or so to not cry every night, and that was so hard to watch.
How do you deal with that, Simon? Because I can't imagine seeing my mother at the age of 10, because my mother was, she was my protector. She was there. She shielded everything from us. And to see your mother cry, to see my mother cry would have absolutely broken my heart. I think I saw her cry once, but for every single night, that must have been. Did you see your mum in a different light? Did you feel like that you needed to step up at such a young age? Yeah,
I can tell you I did not have the equipment to handle it. I can tell you that much. I remember I could hear her from the other end of the house. My room was at one end of the house. She was the main bedroom was at the other end, and I could hear her. I could hear her wailing, and my brother never left his room. And I don't hold that against him. I think he was just like, I don't know what to do. I can't come and face this. And I get that. I would kind of make my way down the hall, little Simon, and I'd stand at the door to her bedroom and she'd be on the bed just wailing. And I was like, maybe sometimes I'd sit there and, pat her on the leg, but then it would keep going. And I'm like, I can't fix this. I can't fix this. Yeah. And so I'd go back to bed and try and sleep. And every night, and I feel so bad for her because, doctors back then would, pass out, mother's little helpers like no one's business. So I think in hindsight, she probably ended up hooked on Mogadon or whatever. Plus, she'd be drinking wine. So that was all she had to use to cope. But
that was her coping mechanism. Yeah,
it was. Yeah. But she still got up every day. Still kind of helped us, made our lunches, saw us off to school every single day. And the days were different. And she'd go and volunteer at the school tuck shop canteen. She'd do all that stuff. And eventually the crying at night was less and less. And eventually, that subsided, that pain subsided. It took a while, but it did. And talk about resilience, I think she was the masterclass in resilience, because resilience doesn't mean that you don't fall in a heap. No. To me, it means you get up. It means you get up. A lot of people lose someone they love. It happens, but a lot of people, it hits them harder. Some people hits them in different ways. But that's why I say masterclass. I think she set the ball rolling. She taught me by example that it's possible, that you can be right down there and you can get back up there. It absolutely is possible. And I almost feel sorry for people, and this will sound weird, who've had a perfect childhood, perfect teenage life, because I think, God, when something happens, I hope you've got what prepared. It takes. Yeah, I really hope you can take it.
So Simon, going back to you though, I know you mentioned your mother. You've lost your father. You're seeing your mother in this state. How did you cope through or manage through the situation? Was your mother a distraction, or did you just not have time to think? Couldn't you understand it? You just went along with whatever was presented in front of you?
Yeah, definitely made it up as I went.
Yeah.
I think there were times when I felt pretty low. I remember being a little guy feeling really low, and it's the only time I've ever had, I think, really dark thoughts. I think I was about 11 or 12. I can't remember. Before I hit high school, actually, which is pretty scary and sad. Thinking, this is so awful. I don't think I want to be around for it. And that was about as close as it went. And then I thought, you know what? She's going through so much, right now. Imagine making it worse. I mean, and so the thought might have only been there for a second or two through the whole time. But the fact that it actually came into my head and came out of it is extremely memorable for me. The fact that it happened. It's the only time in my life that ever happened. But it was so fleeting, because I was like, well, you know what happens, when someone dies, this is what happens. People get hurt. So let's put that out of the equation. It's not really, and I hadn't even really gone deep into it, but that was, and I thought, okay, well, I just have to, people would tell you, be brave for your mum, look after your mum, make sure you look after your mum. That was just something people would say all the time. I'm like, geez, I can't look after my mum. But I ended up turning to, I didn't want people to feel sorry for me. I didn't want pity, and I didn't want people to treat me differently. So at school, as a little fellow, when people kind of looked at me in a sad way, I didn't like it. So I started to use humor. I started to joke around. I started to use whatever tools, and I'd make people laugh. And I much preferred making people laugh than having people look at me with like that poor guy.
Yeah.
So that kind of became a little addictive for me, and I just kept doing the funny. I was obsessed with Warner Brothers cartoons and things like that. So I would learn how to do all those impersonations, and I'd take them to school, and people were like, "Oh, Kennedy, he's so funny." And so for me, it was a good attention. It was a better attention.
Attention, yes. Yes, it was a better attention, like you said. And from what you just said, there's huge compassion and empathy there. Have you always been a compassionate and empathetic individual? Because you said something really that just stuck out to me then when you said, how could I make it? I didn't want to make it worse for my mum, even though you were going through what you were going through. How could I make things better? That takes a huge amount of compassion and empathy to realize that. Do you think that you got that through that situation?
I'm not always compassionate and empathetic. I think I know what not to do. Well, I have my moments, and I think the older I get, the more empathy I have for people I don't know as well. The more of a broad sort of spectrum I see that you don't know what someone's going through. But that said, I stuff up a lot, and my beautiful wife will tell you that there are times where something will be going on with her, and I'll be as stupid as any other husband, and I will not say the right thing, and I'll not do the right thing, and I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I don't know where my head was at for that one. So I'm not perfect, but I'm always trying to improve. Like I'm always retrospective, look back and go, yeah, I could have done better there. I could have done better, and I think that's the best you can do to be a good person, is to admit when you haven't been a good person. I just own that shit.
You received a phone call back in 2001 from your brother Lee, and that changed everything. Tell me about that call.
Yeah. So 2001. So I was living with my girlfriend, who is now my wife. I'd gone to bed. It was late, and it was 10ish at night, and I think I'd had a few drinks, so I hit the hay. Then my phone rang, and my wife, she said, answer your phone. I went, I don't want to go to the phone. I'm going to sleep. She goes, it's your brother calling. Don't worry about it. And he was calling from London. He lived in London. He didn't ring very often. It was very rare. Maybe on my birthday, that'd be it. But I didn't want to answer the phone, but my wife made me. She made me answer. She said, come on. I picked up the phone, and I was pretty drowsy. And he said, hey there, have you been watching the news? I went, no, I've gone to bed. He goes, oh, there's some stuff going on in America. There's some planes have hit some buildings, and I'm just a bit worried about Mum because she's on holidays over there. Mum had gone on a bit of a retirement trip through the US and Canada and all that sort of thing. So she was over there. I'm always a bit like, oh, God, like seriously, like what are the odds, in a country of 300 million people, and you expect that our mum's caught up in something like that. But anyway.
Is that what went through your head? What are the odds? And you were just like.
Yeah, like, know. I mean, honestly, logically speaking, I'm like, come on. I'm like, really? I want to go to sleep here. But my wife said, oh, come on, this is serious. I went, yeah, okay. I said, yeah, well, I'd seen my mum a few weeks before, the day before she left, and she handed me her itinerary, which she would always do. She was very prepared. Worst case scenario, she was on top of it all. She had all that going on. So she gave me her itinerary, and it was weird. It was weird because she had a dark sense of humour herself. I said, she gave it to me, and she said, oh, what do I do? I don't need this. And she said, oh, no, yes, just in case the terrorists get me or something. And that was the kind of dark humour she had. I went to the itinerary. I checked out where Mum was supposed to be at that particular time. I told my brother, I said, looks like she's leaving Washington on American Airlines Flight 77. I remember the silence and the moment. He said, I think that's one of them. And then I just went and turned on the TV, and we had a look at what was going on, and yeah, they started reporting on Flight 77 having hit the Pentagon, and that started the rest of my life, and it was a long night.
Because you haven't got confirmation, is there still something in your head saying, no, it can't be this? What are the odds?
Yeah, I was looking for the angles. That's how I go. So I'm looking for all the possibilities there, and I'm like, well, okay, let's call the hotel she was staying at and see if she's checked out of there. Just make sure of that, because you couldn't get through the airline. It was almost impossible. It was, as you can imagine, everyone's ringing them. So we did that, and they said, oh no, her tour group's still here. And we're like, sweet, this is great, and then we find out later that, we look at the itinerary in detail. It says that she actually splits off from the tour group at that point, and we're like, okay, all right, what do we do? We keep trying the airline. We even called Qantas because it was a Qantas code share, and we get Qantas to help us try and help us find information. And they were great. They were great about it. And so I think it was a good 12 hours. I didn't sleep, obviously, overnight. So we were talking to America, and I think the best information that we got was somewhere maybe within 24 hours that they had issued a boarding pass for Mum. I think that was all we got within sort of about a day. That was the most information that we had.
And at this time, I suppose you've got the TV on non-stop. Your mind's going 10 to the dozen. Are you constantly back and forth on the phone to your brother? Is he doing the same his end?
He was trying, and we basically within that first 24 hours, a lady from Qantas, Michelle, who we're kind of mates with now, she actually got him on a flight back to Sydney. So she organised that. So that we could be together and we could work it out together. My brother and I we're smart fellas, and we both knew logically. We got to a point where we were, you know what? Logically, we know. I mean, it's pretty clear. The numbers tell us she's gone. And I think that we kind of decided pretty early on that we weren't going to play that game. We weren't going to be, when you see people on the news and, the missing kid or the missing wife or the husband, and you see them years later going, we just want to make sure. And we're like, oh man, come on, it's over. I didn't want to be that. I didn't want that.
So when did that penny drop?
To be honest, it happened, I knew within a day. I decided. It might have even been 12 hours. It might have been less. I think I knew. But there is always something in the back of your head. There's always a little thing. But I was not going to let that sort of rule me, because I didn't want to be that guy where they have to slap him across the face and say, for God's sake, man, she's gone, like in the movies. Yeah. But so, so I decided, but it was like a week later that I got anything that resembled confirmation, really. And that was very coerced, the way that was done, a very subversive way. I had a mate who had once worked with the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and he still had connections there. And he talked to his connection, who spoke to someone's connection, and they said, look, he just needs to know. And I got this phone call. I got a phone call like a week later from some unnamed person.
A week later?
Yeah. And it was unofficial as hell. It was some unnamed person who said, hi, I can't tell you who I am, but I'm with Foreign Affairs, and I believe you are looking for some confirmation. And we're like, yeah. And they said, look, well, I can't give you anything official because that's not, this is not meant to happen. He said, but I just want you to know that whatever you think's happened has happened, and that's as good as I can give you. And that was enough anyway. I went, yeah, that's what I thought. So that was that. And we, my brother and I decided that we were going to have a memorial service for my mum pretty soon after that. We weren't going to drag it out, and we were going to mourn her, because I mean, in our family, when people die, the funeral's within a week.
What's going through your head, Simon? I know you're talking about getting, a memorial just to remember it, but the build up in your head, what does it look like?
It was pretty scary, and we were actually really focused on trying to have some privacy, because the media attention started to get pretty heated. People wanted a story. Local media wanted an angle on it. They wanted a story. They wanted a local version of their story. And because look, one of my very best mates is Dave Spears, who works at ABC. He's a political journalist at the ABC. He's fantastic. We've been friends for a long, long time. And he was working at Sky News back at the time. And when we decided that, okay, we accept that Mum's gone and this is how she's gone, we wrote a statement from the family, and I gave it to Dave. I said, you can put this out there, and if anyone comes asking, tell them that we don't want to talk to anybody, and this is all they're going to get. This is it. That's the statement. That's that. Because we wanted to grieve privately, because I think it would have made grieving very hard. I think having to do all that media stuff. I think it would have been not. I mean, I was used to media. Or I'd been working in media, but I knew. I think because of that, I knew that my family didn't need that. So we did that. But I thought that was a good plan. But I think it just drew focus to us. And then we had journalists who kind of stalked us out the front of our house and made sort of, I won't say threats, but indicated that if we didn't talk to him, that other people might find out where we live and whatever. It was pretty shitty stuff.
Yeah, it's brutal. It is brutal.
It's like you sort of. I mean, now I think I understand what celebrities with paparazzi feel like. It's like that's just horrible. So there was a bit of that, but so we were kind of hiding as well. That's what we were doing. We were hiding in the house from the public, trying to grieve, trying to work it all out. It was a whirlwind of a time. And was I angry about the terrorists at that point? No, because I just had too much of a plate to even think about who had done it.
Revenge, anger, aggression, did that ever rear itself, or was that just flushed in the background because you had so much going on?
I honestly think that the who did it, the actual who did it, was always pushed aside by everything that was right in front of me. Like all of the challenges that I was dealing with on a day-to-day basis, just trying to have a normal life, the whole media stuff, trying to avoid that. And then all the other stuff I started to see in the news, which was the Islamophobia that came out. And before I got a chance to even decide if I was angry at bin Laden and his crew, I felt very defensive for Muslim Australians and anyone of Middle Eastern appearance, because I could see that everyone's turning their anger towards them.
There's that compassion and empathy right there, Simon.
Yeah, so maybe it comes out. Maybe there's a bit of it, but it really worried me. It bothered me so much to the point that I felt I had to say, you know what? One swallow doesn't make a summer. This was an isolated group of people. These are just Australians like you and I. I mean, and that played out year on year and year on year. And I remember when the Cronulla riots happened, I'm like, this is not what my mother would have wanted. So it got to the point where I just didn't have any room to hate the people who did it, because I felt I was so busy trying to be a better person than all the other people that I was seeing out there who were being absolute bigots and pieces of shit. I'm like, you know what? I'm like, if I can have compassion for these people, why the hell can't you? And it became a thing that distracted me, and I never really thought much about the guys who did it.
Were you never curious to sort of, in a positive way, because that's the way you tackle things, to really, find out and go deeper into this situation? Because it wasn't just the death of your mother. This carried on into a 20-year conflict in Afghanistan. And, something, like I said, it doesn't matter how much you go about your business, the net's going to come up and catch your foot one day and drag you in. Did that ever happen?
Yeah, look, I mean, you're right. It's year on year. Everything for me felt like well, that came from 9/11. The way we're doing this, that comes from 9/11. Everything, by the way we travel, everything, but the personal security laws that we live under, the privacy laws that we live under, everything right now. I mean, I'm president of an association of voice actors who are trying to put in some sort of fight against AI, generative AI stealing our jobs. And we don't have, because we don't have, personal copyright over our image or our voice. And a lot of that is because of our privacy laws that are post 9/11. So ironically, I'm trying to deal with unraveling something that came from 9/11. It's everything joins up in a way. It's kind of it's a knock-on effect. The war in Iraq was something that used to get me angry. They used to make me angry that was happening. That was happening, that they were trying to justify going into Iraq for my mum or for our families, and I'm like, I can see that that's BS. Don't say it. Don't say it's for me. So I used to get really fiery about that. Like, I was in 2002. I was at the Pentagon for a memorial, the 1 year memorial, and I was introduced to Donald Rumsfeld, and I was like, oh, you and George W. Bush had basically announced at that point that we're going to go get these guys, and then they went into Iraq shortly after, and I'm like, you just used us as and that made me more.
How you felt?
Oh, it made me more angry than anything, and all these innocent, men and women who went in to fight for something that they shouldn't have been fighting for and died. I'm like, this is just unbelievable. When that made me angry. That actually got me angry that it was used as well. But I, a few years ago, took the opportunity from the Department of Defense. They reach out to families a lot, the ones who are prosecuting the 5 9/11 co-conspirators in Guantanamo Bay. So Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and his 4 cronies there, they've been there since 20 odd years.
Yeah, I was going to say they're in Guantanamo Bay right now.
Yeah, and the trial is still ongoing. And I went there a few years ago. I was invited, and I said, "Yeah, I'll go. I'll go."
You went to Guantanamo Bay?
I did. Yeah.
Wow.
And first,
why?
I think it was curiosity. I'd said no a few times because I'm like, I'm not equipped for this. And then at one point I went, you know what?
What year was this, if you don't mind
So
me
this was 2018 or 19, I think, pre-COVID. And I went there, and there's only 10 Australians who were killed in the 9/11 attack. So the community here is not much of a community. It's I've met a few of the families, but I didn't really have anything to do with them much. It wasn't a lot of a support network as such. And I went over there and I spent a week with 6 other family members, all Americans, who had lost a mother or a brother or a dad. And it was awesome. It was awesome. And I did not expect that to be the case.
How?
Well, because they were like me, and they could relate to me, even though they were American. They were like me, and they knew what it was like to carry that event on their shoulders in conjunction with the loss of the person they loved. And we would sit there and we'd talk and we'd joke with each other. I'd make jokes with them that I couldn't make with anybody.
Yeah, of course.
Or if I made a joke like that with somebody here, they'd be like, "Oh my God, he's not right." And it was
humor.
Yeah, and so we would all relate to the various aspects of being a 9/11 orphan or whatever you would want to call it. And so a few of those people now I'm very close with, and I've seen them since I've gone back to the US, and one of them, their daughter came and stayed with us here, and it's like my 9/11 family, my Gitmo family actually, my Gitmo. But so I went there and I sat up the back of the courtroom with these other family members, looking through the glass at 5 men who basically were architects of the death of my mother and around almost 3,000 other people. And I looked through the glass at KSM, they call it Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, and I felt nothing. I felt nothing, and I was surprised. And I thought to myself, should I? Is something wrong with me? And Donna, who was my friend from Long Island, there, she was seething. I saw her looking at him, and she was seething. She was angry, but I wasn't. And I love my mum and I miss it crazy. But I thought, why am I not angry? And I think it's because I thought of it in a sense that it wasn't really so much a person who did it, or just people who did it. I think it was an idea and an ideology that killed my mother, and these people were puppets of that. And I somehow felt a bit sad for them, but I didn't feel hatred for them. And people say, "Do you forgive them?" And I'm like, well, I'm not sure if you can forgive someone if they don't take responsibility or they're not sorry. That makes it hard. But what I did was I decided somewhere along the line, and I can't tell you when, that I wasn't going to carry hatred for these people. And some of that, some people might say that's very big of you, but I think it's also very selfish of me, because I think that there's a great quote, and I love, I don't know who said it, carrying hatred for somebody else is like you swallowing poison and expecting them to die. It doesn't affect them. It only affects you. So selfishly, I decided, well, I'm not gonna have my life consumed by hate, because that's just going to get in the way of my happiness and my contentment and the relationships that I need to keep building moving forward. And one of the other ones that I always bank on is the only thing required for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing.
Good men to do nothing.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm not going to be one of the bad guys. I'm not going to stop by while someone slings arrows at a Muslim fella who's done nothing. I'm going to say, hey, leave him alone. And I've got more Muslim friends now than I did have pre-2001.
And whilst we're on the subject of your mum, and it's a very tough question and one that I'm probably a bit insensitive to ask, but I'm going to ask you.
Do it.
What do you think your mum would have been doing in those final moments that she was on the plane? And again, I know it's a super tough question, but you knowing your mum better than anyone else, the lady that she was in those final moments of her life, what do you think that she would have been doing, and how do you think she would have acted?
Well, my mum gave up a good 30-odd years of her life to the Australian Red Cross. She was a first aid instructor, and she worked with the voluntary aid emergency response groups. And when there was a Granville train disaster in Sydney back in the 70s, she was there helping people, getting people out and doing first aid on them. When there were floods in Sydney, she was out there with the SES helping. When the Thredbo landslide happened, apparently she was there as well. I know my mum, and she would have probably been holding someone's hand and telling them it's going to be okay. She would have been she would have been making someone feel good or better about the situation. And a girl reached out to me on Facebook, and her mum was on the plane, and found out that her mum was actually sitting next to my mum on the plane. So, and I told her this. I said that they probably would have been holding hands all the way down, and that's what I reckon she was doing.
That is phenomenal. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, mate. Thank you ever so much for coming on. Head Game, again, the epitome of resilience, but in such a positive way. It's been inspirational. Thank you, mate.
And thank you so much for having me, mate.
Simon Kennedy is the author of 9/11 and the Art of Happiness, an Australian story. I'll link the details in the show notes. Thanks so much for joining me on Head Game. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of our incredible stories, and leave me a review wherever you're listening. I'm Matt Middleton. Catch you again next time.